And what were they seeing? Those 23,000 hours. What did you say? Garbage. It was garbage. Well, there's some Nirvana in there, so that wasn't complete garbage. But really what they were seeing was those institutions that were built by traditionalists and greatly proved upon by baby boomers were all being called into question during this time on national television. I will never forget, when I was an intern at Bridgeworks a long time ago, I was sitting in on a focus group that some other consultants were doing, and a Gen Xer said to them, "You name the institution and I will name the crime." And that's pretty powerful to hear from someone that's their view of the world. So, and even at this time, I definitely think about it. There were so many close attempts at peace in Israel, and there were all these almost, and then nothing ever really came to be. A lot of broken promises on that front. And so not only were they watching institutions fall apart on TV, the most sacred of institutions during that time, that of marriage, was falling apart on the home front. During the Gen X U.S. birth years, the U.S. divorce rate tripled. That's a pretty drastic change in a very small amount of time. So these kids, they were coming home from school, they were putting their own dinner in the microwave, they were doing their own homework, they were organizing their own time, and for any of you who know anything or have millennial children, you know that's not how we do it, that's not how we did it. And it was because of this that they became fiercely independent operators. This is a generation that is very comfortable with change, very entrepreneurial, but above all, they are incredibly skeptical. Okay? And how could you not be after growing up with that in that kind of environment? This was when faces were on milk cartons. The world was just a much scarier place in general. And for any of my numbers people out there was a study done out of Third Millennium. It's a market research firm in New York. And this is what they found. Gen Xers believe they have a greater chance of seeing a UFO in their lifetime than a Social Security check. That's pretty insane. So for a long time, a lot of the nonprofits were really focusing on that idealism, that optimism, and these are the great things that we're going to do, and we're going to push everything forward, and all of this. And then the Red Cross actually did something very interesting, where they stopped looking so much at baby boomers. They started looking at Gen Xers, and they got an amazing reaction. And this is the campaign that they ran.
They've given our generation a label.
Sorry, it's a little loud.
X. Generation nothing. They say we have no sense of purpose. They say we have no war to fight and no cause to believe in. Who are they? Join the thousands of us who are making a difference and wear a label that does mean something.
Totally different. Definitely the first nonprofit to actually take a look at that next generation of leaders, and it was because of this that a lot of that loyalty that is developed early went to the American Red Cross. A lot of that can be pinpointed to this campaign and others that they did surrounding this. So what does this mean for you as development volunteers? This is a generation that is going to question every single thing that you say and everything that you do. Have any of you made calls and you're feeling this? Okay? And really what this is, where we find some nonprofits flounder is that they listen to this questioning and they take it as a no. Because they're going to ask you, okay, this is an umbrella organization. Where does this money actually go? And how do I make sure that it's going to the most vulnerable? And how can I track where my money is going? And question after question after question. I know this because my boss is a Gen X, and I'll be like, I'm going to get Subway, and I'll get questioned on that. I'm like, it's just Subway. It's not, it doesn't need to be a back and forth. And it's hard. It's hard to be questioned all the time. And a big tip with Gen Xers, and this is not brain surgery, and this can be sometimes the most difficult, but you have to just embrace the skepticism. When you go into those calls, when you go into those solicitations, you have to know every single thing to answer all of these questions that they're going to ask you. Some of the things that are actually already really great is this distributions and allocations. And this is right on your website, and people can already see where every dollar is going. This is also the generation, I know I talked to a lot of you about targeted giving, and this is the generation that is going to want to hear all about that. because they are going to be able to track actually where their donations are going and making sure that it's going to the causes that they want it to go to and that they feel that they have some control over that. And so the other thing is just complete transparency, okay? And this is the generation, along with that money allocation and where everything is going, but also just being really forthright about what is going right, what is going really wrong. And where boomers, we were trying to go to that emotional decision center where you want to steal their hearts. With Gen Xers, they will bring the opinions, you have to bring the facts. And then they will make a decision based on that. So it's a very different ask. And that's where a lot of that comes from. I love the employment assistant program offered through the Federation. I spoke with Bonnie. I was talking to you about that. So another thing that is very cool about this program is that Gen Xers were at a very vulnerable place in their careers when the 2008 recession happened. And something like this program, no matter what, if you speak to a Gen Xer, on some level they were affected by this. They know someone, they remember, because where the baby boomers were a lot of that C-suite and the millennials were a lot of still in college, the Gen Xers were really in a place where, unfortunately, they were the most disposable at the time in terms of the recession. So that program is definitely something to highlight with Gen Xers. Bonnie, you also talked to me about the Community Education Forum. And this, I think, does everyone know what this is? I'm assuming since the Community Education Forum. Oh, okay. So, well, what it is that okay, it's through the Women's Philanthropy. Okay. Well, so the Women's Philanthropy did this community education forum where agencies came in, and it was basically an agency spotlight sort of thing where people could walk around and get a better understanding of who the agencies were. And something like this is wonderful for Gen Xers because they no longer have to wonder, well, where is my money going? This is where it's going, this is how it's being used, this is how it's being allocated, this is how we're making sure that it's being given to the people that it needs to go to. So those are some of the huge things. And again, the targeted giving. And the thing with Gen Xers that I think a lot of us maybe take for granted or don't think of is people will give up on them too early. And one thing that I think that Gen Xers did wonderful for society and for nonprofits, for everyone, is they hold us accountable. So when they are coming to you and asking you questions, you just have to know and be confident in the fact that the St. Louis Jewish Federation is doing amazing things and doing everything right, and it's just knowing the answers to those tough questions. Okay? So now we've got these three very different generations that we're trying to get a hold of and get our arms around and engage and solicit. And then comes the millennials, that last generation. Now, this is the generation that was born into the information superhighway. And now, the other generations are merging on, but this generation was really born into the fast lane. And where for other generations there were scary things happening across oceans, for us it was in the desks next to us. We are the generation of Columbine, of Virginia Tech, of the Oklahoma City bombing, of September 11th. Very different world. The other thing that makes us somewhat different and can drive some of you crazy is that we are the generation of those can-do baby boomers, and we were born and bred in the self-esteem movement. Okay? I actually have a 6th place trophy in dance. I'm actually a horrible dancer, but my parents, you would have thought I was the next Jennifer Lopez. They were like, she is going to be a famous dancer, and I was like, I'm a terrible dancer, and I have a 6th place trophy. I don't even know what that means. Now, in terms of Judaism, this is a lot of interesting things are happening for us during our teenage years. We watched the first and second Intifadas. We watched Operation Cast Lead, and for the millennials in the room, you may remember that there was a lot of anti-Israel sentiment, a lot of criticism on campus during this time. And because of a lot of these different things, we have very close relationships with our parents. We are hyper-collaborative. We are globally aware. We are information-obsessed. We are multitaskers. And all of these things lead us to who we are, who makes this generation. Now, after speaking with a few of you, this part I actually struggled with a little bit, exactly what to talk about with you with millennials. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about with any generation. But after seeing a lot of what was going on in the strategic plan and speaking with a lot of you, I'm actually bypassing the obvious things that you guys know, okay? and I'll touch on them very quickly. But one of them being is that millennials don't have a lot of money right now. But by 2017, which is in 5 years, we will outspend the baby boomers. So that is a huge shift in the economic landscape. Also, and this is actually more of a life stage thing than a generational thing, except when trying to attract millennials, obviously fun. I know that we had spoken about that in our interview, but doing a lot of the fun things. And those are actually, I mean, the Federation is doing an amazing job just talking to some of the people and about things that are going on here right now. We've got that erotic Valentine's Day program. Who was I speaking to about that? I was like, what is this? We have not done something like that at our Federation, but that's very cool. The Vegas themed party, the Western themed party, a lot of these great events. And that is obviously a great way to get the baby boomers. I'm sorry, to get the millennials. The other thing about millennials that I did speak with some of you about that you understand is that this generation actually is very, very loyal. 86% of US millennials said that they will stay with a brand or a company that they like, okay? But the thing is that they develop these relationships and these loyalties at a very young age. And I mentioned that I worked with the United Way a little bit, and one of the places where they missed the boat was on this very thing. They waited until millennials maybe had a little bit of money and had more to give, and then they went after them. And Big Brothers Big Sisters has been going after us since we were 12. And there were these other programs, and they had missed the boat. And now there are some umbrella organizations, somewhat like the Federation, that didn't tap into the fact that these loyalties build at such a young age and lost them and missed them. And it's very hard to tear them away from places where they're already loyal. The good thing about, I cannot believe how many millennials are here tonight. Usually, the few times that I've gone to Jewish federations or anything like that, it is not like this. So that speaks very, very highly of the Federation itself. So something else that I'm going to talk about in terms of how you speak with them, their language, is something that maybe you haven't thought of, and I actually think that most nonprofits haven't thought of, and could be a huge differentiating point. There was this odd thing that happened when you put those optimistic baby boomer parents with this generation that has seen a lot at a very young age. So we aren't skeptical like the Gen Xers, but we are definitely not optimistic like our parents. What has resulted is a very realistic and pragmatic generation. And oftentimes, when nonprofits will speak to us, it is again with with those lofty goals and with those huge visions. And to a millennial, that is not motivating. That is completely unrealistic. And I'm going to give you, there's one case study that's in here. There's one that I just want to share with you because it may be on some people's minds. But has anyone watched Kony 2012? Yes? Some people? Okay. If you haven't, it's on YouTube. It's a powerful documentary. It's a very cool piece. It's 30 minutes. And it is about Joseph Kony, who is a warlord in Africa. Now, we have gotten dozens and dozens of emails from our clients who have watched Kony 2012 and written to us as their consultants and said, I have never seen a more millennial movement in my entire life. Okay? And this is, before this, the Obama campaign was the millennial movement. That decision was made by the millennial generation. Now this Kony 2012, watch this video. Now knowing what you know about millennials, I would love to hear your reaction to it. But one of the things that they did do that some people, actually in other generations, are giving them slack for, but I think was brilliant, was the absolute simplicity of the message. The message in this video is not to save Africa. It's not to end the war. It's not to save all children soldiers. It has one goal, to arrest Joseph Kony, okay? And this simplicity, the reason that it is resonating so much with millennials is because it's very realistic, okay?
And they don't ask for money in that video.
And they don't ask for money in the video. That's true. That's true.
Spread the word.
Right. It's about awareness. It's about awareness. But where some...
Because I kept waiting. I'm like, okay, where's the ask? Where's the ask?
Yeah. And there's no ask. There's no ask. And a lot of that has to do with just the fact that millennials love to share the things that they love. and it goes viral so fast. I think, what was it, in 4 days, 75 million people have seen this. And I'm bringing this up because I think it is an interesting case study for people to follow, because if this works, the power will have shifted without us even knowing. But the world game will have changed based on this somewhat minor 30-minute YouTube video. But what I'm talking about here with that realistic and pragmatic generation is that the goal is very direct and very simple and very understandable, in the sense that if we come together as a community, as a world, as a global community, it is this one thing to arrest this one person. And from our clients all over, we're getting the strongest reaction hearing from them about what this Kony 2012 is. The other case study that I'm going to show you is, how many Gen Xers remember the Just Say No campaign? Yes? Were you guys like, just say no? You were like screaming it, right? It was like the biggest deal. Just say no to drugs. This was the war on drugs, okay? The war on drugs. Nancy Reagan came up with this in the 80s. And then they just kept it because it was very effective with Gen Xers. So they brought it down to millennials, and it didn't work at all. It had a reverse effect. Okay? Drug use actually went up. It did not resonate with them at all, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that just say no to drugs is not realistic for a lot of communities. They weren't taking into consideration where people were from and where they were living and all of this. So the Partnership for Drug-Free America redid the campaign. And I'm going to show you that campaign, and this is the realistic Just Say No.
My teacher tells us just say no. Policeman says the same thing. They should walk home through here. Because the dealers don't take no for an answer.
To Kevin Scott and all the other kids who take the long way home, we hear you. Don't give up.
So the Partnership for Drug-Free America turned Just Say No into Don't Give Up. And this was an incredibly effective campaign with the millennial generation. So the big tip here is to focus on even if it is a lofty goal, how you're getting there and where they play a role in that. And just painting that picture, because it lets them have an impact, it lets their voice be heard, and it is empowering because it's something that can actually happen. And so that is the big takeaway tip when you're speaking with millennials. The other way to really tap into this generation is that we are hyper-collaborative. We grew up in very communicative families with our parents. If I was late for curfew, we would all sit around the dinner table and we're like, how do you think you should be punished? And I was like, well, maybe I can't go to Sarah's party on Friday, or whatever it was. But we would come up with that together. And that is not, it used to be top down, your parents were your authority, and now your parents were your friends. It was very different. And because of that, there's this, we don't really listen as much to the top-down control and command hierarchy. And so making it a collaborative talk. What are you looking for in the Federation? What do you want out of it? Do you the hands-on volunteering, what is it exactly that you're looking for, and how can we come up with that together? The other thing that's cool about being hyper-collaborative is there is a strong sense of community. And something that I was talking to Nancy Green about, Nancy's not here, is she? Oh, you are here. Oh, wonderful. Okay, good. I know, let's see. I actually think this is brilliant, but I had asked Nancy Green, what is a really effective part of your ask? When you're asking for people, what really resonates? And she said that explaining that Jews are responsible for helping Jews, and no one else is going to donate to the Jewish Federation except for one another, and we are always stronger when we work together. Okay? Brilliant. And I thought it was great, but I shared with Nancy a story from when I was growing up. I was 13. I was in my formative years. It was my bat mitzvah. We give the money away, and I think at the time the Susan G. Komen is a wonderful foundation. I'm not bashing Susan G. Komen, but it was very hip at the time. It was very cool, and I was like, I'm going to give all the money to Susan G. Komen. And my dad actually told me a similar message, and he said maybe some of the money can go to Susan G. Komen, and some can go to Israel, or can go to the Federation, or go to JFCS. But it was at that moment that he really taught me that we take care of each other. And that's when we're strongest. And I will tell you that millennials are ripe for that message. We like that message and we understand it, we respond to it, and that is another great point to bring up when you're making the ask and trying to engage millennials. Now, the one thing that I heard over and over again when talking to everyone, I asked people, how did you get involved? Why are you involved in the Federation? And almost all of you said, because someone asked me. And for some of you, it was your friends. And for some of you, it was just someone who lived in your building. Was that, yeah. And I think that's very powerful. And I think that sometimes we forget and we judge too soon. And we just think that person isn't in an economic place to give, or I don't have very much in common with that person. But the truth is that if you can find a way to speak to their motives and speak their language, and if a passionate person who really believes in the Federation comes and speaks to you in a language that you respond to, that is the most powerful. So thank you guys so much for having me. I have a final clip here. I have to thank Jessica Litwack for bringing me in. She's so wonderful and so just progressive in your thinking and all of this. And she was like my big sister here today. She picked me up. We went to lunch. It was wonderful. And I so appreciate that. And just speaking to so many of you, such a wonderful, strong community here. And I was just wonderful to get to know it. And you know, we have to not spend so much time thinking about who is right and who is wrong and what works and what doesn't work. More, we just have to celebrate that the generations are different and we come from different places, and to celebrate that like this last commercial does so well.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and others do for you. May you build the ladder to the stars and climb on every run, and may you stay forever young. May you stay forever young. Yeah. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. And may you have a strong foundation when the winds of change shift. And may your heart always be joyful. And may your song always be sung. May you stay forever young. May you stay forever young.
Every generation refreshes the world.
Cool.
Thank you. And now, if anyone has any questions, I can answer anything. Or, yeah, please.
So, millennium was ending in 2000.
Ending in 2000.
So, what's next?
So the next generation. So actually, when they're about 16 years old, Bridgeworks, along with a couple market research firms, lets them vote. That's how millennial came to be, because it was Gen Y, and then millennials, when they were 16, got to vote on what they wanted. So some people are calling them iGen, some people are calling them Matrix generation. There's a lot of names floating around right now. We actually won't know until they vote on it, what they want. The other thing is that they're actually not in their formative years yet, and so we still track them. We track all of their consumer habits, the way that they influence money right now, some of their behavioral patterns, but until they get into that real chunk of their teenage years, we're not quite sure. But that is going to be fascinating, and I will keep you posted on who they are, but it will be cool. Yeah.
I'm thinking ahead, and I would love to use your brilliance and expertise a little bit more Federation-wide. And we have a group of volunteers within Women's Philanthropy all over the Federation that are development volunteers that I would love to be able to give them a handout or something that can help them when they go to make their calls. I don't think that I can do justice to what you said to us, and would love if you have something that you can maybe provide for us that are little bullet points to help empower our DVs to make more successful calls and to be more comfortable doing so.
I do, and actually, did we send that to you already? Did Cal send that to you? I'll send that to Jessica, and she can, or I can send that to you. Yeah, and we actually do have something about how to engage donors in different generations.
But just the way that you put it is so engaging and easy to listen to, and so different than what we as a group are used to practicing, that I think it would be enlightening and wonderful for everyone.
Well, thank
Very
you.
helpful.
Heidi, also,
Thank you.
we actually are videotaping tonight, I don't know if you noticed this. and
Oh,
we
God.
put together some clips, so people who couldn't make it tonight will actually do.
Oh, that's great.
I think I already told people, but I'm shinier on camera than I am in real life, if you can imagine. So just beware of that in the film.
The other thing is, a lot
yeah.
of us have the book that
The M Factor, or When Generations
When
Collide.
Generations
Mhm.
Collide, which is, it's a very fast read, and I'll get you my copy.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
It's
I think they sell on your website, right?
we don't, but we work with we have our products team who does. Also, When Generations Collide and the M Factor they can be downloaded on e-reader, or they're in any bookstore also. But
But
Yeah.
even for those who don't want to do the read,
yeah.
Cliff Notes would be fabulous.
Okay.
Really, because it just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
May show my age, and I can't remember which one it was when you were talking, but you had mentioned it was either Millenniums or Generation Xers that you felt that we sort of missed the boat in terms of branding, loyalty.
Yeah. I don't think that the St. Louis Federation did, but yeah.
Okay, so that there were organizations out there that missed the boat
Yeah.
too early. Is there anything that we can do now that would keep us from missing the boat in
You're-
the next generation? Yeah.
Oh, for the next wave. I think that part of it is life stage and not generational, in the sense that young people, they don't have money, so they can't be hit up for that. They like hands-on volunteering, and most of you would feel like that when you were in your 20s as well. So this is not a generational thing. Let me just make sure that that's out there. But hands-on volunteering, and then fun activities. Just
So do you
in-
think that it would help or benefit to sort of give people an opportunity to thank them for service as well as giving money?
for the young generation. Oh, yeah. Thanking them for their service, thanking them for their involvement. I will tell you that a great way to thank millennials without being like the thank you is really letting them know that they are having an impact. Letting them know that their voices are really being brought to the table, they're really being heard, and that, because, I'm bringing this to corporate just because that's where I work most of the time, but we tell this to CEOs all the time, that just invite their voice to the table and thank them for it when they do, because one of two things can happen. We can say something, tragically idiotic, and then there's a moment of coaching, or we could say something brilliant. And for every 100 bad ideas, if you have one brilliant genius idea, it was worth it. And so, thanking them for that, just for their ongoing contributions, and implementing the things that are good. That's the best way to show that you're hearing them. Yeah, here, I'll go here. Yeah.
Being a traditionalist.
No.
Thank you for everything.
Really? Oh my. Okay, you're already putting it to use. That's so good. Okay, yes.
We're building on your bricks and mortar.
Okay.
With the 4 generations, is there any constant? Is there anything that can move?
Go all through them?
Yeah.
There are a couple things. Actually, when we did our huge national survey in 2009, one of the questions that was on there was, how important is having fun at work to you? And we asked that basically just anticipating that millennials are going to be like, it's super important. And everyone else is going to be like, it's not that important. I'm at work to work. 98% of all respondents said that having fun was either very important or important in their work life, which was something that was interesting. But there are always things, meaning. Meaning is very important to each generation. I will tell you, though, that it means something very different to every generation. So there are constants. There's making an impact, there's meaning, there's having fun, there's your community, your family. There are so many constants, but it shows up in different ways, basically.
Except in fundraising, relationships?
In fundraising, there are relationships. Now, obviously, there's, with the millennial generation, there are some differences where how those relationships are built. It's not always face-to-face, but those actual relationships is still the best way to make an ask. It's still that customization. Even more so with millennials, because we grew up in an age of extreme customization. We don't even have to buy CDs. We just get exactly what song we want anytime we want it. And so there is still the customization aspect, and it doesn't always take place in the person to person. So that is another difference. Yeah?
What's the role of social media in fundraising?
The role of social media in fundraising is huge, I think. That the ability, once something goes viral, then it's out there and it's big and people are looking